The atmosphere in the troop transport was tense. In 3 short standard hours, they would hit planetside to shore up the Alliance's terrestrial defense, to maintain the planetary launches necessary to keep the supply chains going. The 120 soldiers glanced at each other, or pointedly focused on their armaments, ignoring the unspoken question if this would be their last deployment. It was a mixed group of species, representing the best of the Alliance. There were even some humans on board the transport, though they were in the minority compared to the other members present. While the humans didn't excel in any particular area of combat, coming in second or third consistently across all metrics meant they were perfect for situations when the unexpected was the only thing that could be expected. And with success necessary to hold a planet critical to the Alliance's logistics on this edge of their territory, Command had decided to approve mission requests carte blanche. This led to the rather uncomfortable position Sergeant Wall found himself in, sitting across from the troop leader, Captain Dortz. Wall kept himself perfectly still, his eyes flicking between his superior's commanding officer and the creature on his lap, which had begun grooming itself once it had settled on the sergeant. Had he been 150 kilograms lighter and about 1.5 meters shorter, he would have found the predator terrifying, as opposed to just mildly alarming.
"We are going into battle. Why is this thing here?"
Wall grunted, in their shared species equivalent of a hushed whisper at the captain. Captain Dawes gave a tired glare at the sergeant, then looked around the transport and at the curious gazes some of his soldiers gave him, as he considered how best to answer the question. Perhaps unsurprisingly, none of the humans seemed to notice the confusion among their ranks. Dawes gave out a silent trill and stood, grabbing at one of the stabilizer bars above his head to keep his steady, as the ultralight transport vessel maintained its acceleration toward the planet. When he spoke, his voice was clear and loud enough to be heard over the engines and the fidgeting of the soldiers on board.
"Our mission is to provide relief to the 82nd Division, 111th Regiment. We will disembark and immediately be faced with enemy fire as we help our fellow soldiers dig into the surface and maintain the battle line long enough for our orbitals to realign and begin pushing the Confederacy back. If we do not, and the line collapses, we will lose a strategically significant foothold in this war. Do you understand, soldiers?"
At once, a call went up from every soldier present as they affirmed their orders drilled into them at the briefing. Dawes then turned to the sergeant and gestured gently at the creature on Wall's lap as he continued.
12 standard years ago, a recon op was sent beyond enemy lines to secure a rhodium refinery. It was heavily guarded by orbitals and 2 cruisers, with dozens of armed transports maintaining a logistics line from the system's inner asteroid field to the habitable planet where the refinery was located. It was a small platoon, only a couple dozen of our finest, drawn from the most elite forces of the Alliance. One member, a human, was selected along with his domesticated canid animal companion, what the humans call a dog. Colonel Wilson Shaw, the human in question, had been serving as a human ranger for 15 years when he was selected by his superiors to join the operation. His one condition is that he be allowed to bring his companion with him. The humans agreed, despite the rest of the Alliance Council's obvious confusion. Wouldn't it just be a liability, they asked. To prove their point, when the recon team hit planetside, they were almost instantly bombarded by orbitals trying to pinpoint their location. Half the team was wounded in the first 10 standard minutes of landing. The dog, whose name was Killshot, was wounded by shrapnel in that first attack. Despite this, the human and his companion dragged the injured across kilometers of dense terrain to a secure point hidden from orbital bombardment. Killshot was personally responsible for rescuing 3 team members by himself, hauling their unconscious bodies by their harnesses until Colonel Shaw could get them stabilized. At this point, the team was in the dark. They had no communications, no backup, and were, at the time, assumed lost. At this point, the story turns apocryphal, but personally knowing one of the soldiers who survived, I choose to believe their story. Shaw abandoned his rations, loaded up on ammo from those who wouldn't be able to assist, and called his companion over to him. He turned to the rest of his platoon and pulled out a map of the terrain leading to the refinery. Shaw and Killshot would advance around to the rear of the refinery, infiltrate and disable the terrestrial defenses, of which there were few. Once they were rendered inoperable, the rest of the platoon would advance quickly and loudly to take over the refinery and commandeer its aerial defenses. The platoon was shocked by this declaration, but with no other option they decided it was the best plan they had. And so, the platoon waited while Short and Killshot took off. It took them days to traverse the landscape of large rocky outcropping and densely clustered trees, but just as the platoon was beginning to make a quiet run for the corner of the refinery nearest to them, the terrestrial defenses started turning off one by one. They sprinted the distance between their location and the refinery in a matter of hours, that echoed of weeks with each pounding breath. When they arrived, they discovered Colonel Shaw in the control room, with Killshot in the refinery's cafeteria, watching guard over the compound's population of scientists, engineers, labourers, and what soldiers were on hand for security. According to my unnamed friend, Killshot had 6 confirmed kills in that mission. Or at least, there were 6 dead Confederate soldiers that had no evidence of ballistics or less fire wounds. The Alliance, in recognition of Shaw and Killshot's achievement, granted Killshot the rank of Sergeant to match his human military rank. In less than 2 years, humans were deploying squadrons to the Alliance war effort, with animal companions almost regularly. But that's not why I shared this story. I shared this story to provide background for the 61st Division, 103rd Regiment, 213th Battalion, the Immortal Doves. The battalion was mostly humans and was considered a logistics and communications battalion. They were never put on the front lines, only ever placed just behind them, to ferry communications and assist in coordinating resupplies, with those being hammered by Confederate forces. And they were good at it. Even when signals were jammed and entangled communication was impossible, they managed to convey orders and get supplies to where they were needed most. This is largely thanks to Sergeant Harper, the Immortal Doves' companion and mascot, what the humans call a messenger pigeon. Sergeant Harper could fly nearly 100 kilometers an hour, and was trained enough to identify multiple message drop points, based entirely on what food it was given. So even when the Confederates forced a combat point to go dark, completely wiping all energy production and maintaining constant digital warfare, the Immortal Doves were still sending and receiving orders, directing supply chains, and keeping our soldiers alive. But the Confederacy is not stupid. They quickly identified the single non-terrestrial avian, and spent quite a bit of time and ordnance to take it down. Sergeant Harper was shot down while delivering his final message. But that's not the end of the story. The Immortal Doves took the attack personally, and formally requested to join the front lines. Unable to deny their request during a desperate attack by the Confederacy, the Alliance sent them forward. The humans fought with such ferocity that the Confederacy was slowly pushed back. Imagine, a logistics unit outperforming battle-tested frontline soldiers. It was madness. But that madness broke the Confederacy's flank and let us push them back to another system. The Confederacy began targeting the human battle companions, but to their discredit it only served to enrage our soldiers. Not just the humans, but all our Alliance members, as once you fought alongside a creature, sapient or not, they are of your blood. It didn't take much longer for the Confederacy to learn their lesson. The battle companions are off limits. If they are injured, the Confederacy quickly calls for a ceasefire, or begins retreating. For all this, the war with the Confederacy has, for all that war can be, become more humane. Collateral damage is now considered with greater respect, and engagements have become more about tactical positioning rather than outright bloodshed. And that is why, Sergeant Wall, Master Sergeant Duchess is aboard this transport, and why, after 16 successful mission deployments, she outranks you. Wall lowered his posture in deference to the Colonel, and looked down at the orange tabby cat who returned his gaze with her single eye. "Sir, yes sir," was all he said. The humans on board gave a single, short, collective roar for their commanding officer.